the Hypergallery print room on a rainy day in Henley-on-Thames, where I'm here with a long-standing collector of Hypergallery work and friend, Mark Overton, about his collection of album cover art and rock photography that has been described by Bonhams as one of the largest in Europe, I believe, Mark. And I'm going to talk to him a little bit about how he got into this and some of the guides that he's created for himself that he is very kindly sharing with us today for how to consider purchasing works of art to add to your collection. So, welcome, Mark, and thank you for bringing those amazing prints in your beautiful flights case today.
No problem.
So let's start with your early interest. Did your interest come from music? Was it music that got you into this?
Yeah, from music originally. Like lots of people watching today, started going to concerts and rock gigs when I was some sort of 14, 15. I think the Motors were the first show I ever saw.
I was going to say first gig.
Yeah, first gig, UEA, 1977. So progressed through, watched some big bands. Fortunate enough to be of an age that I could catch Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and a lot of big bands. So yeah, started with gigs.
And so when did that develop into collecting? Were you collecting like gig posters, or when did that develop into collecting limited edition prints and photography?
Well, as a quirk of fate, I got to an age where I could finally have my own study at home. So I was working one day and looked at this big empty space on the wall and thought, what could I put up there? And coincidentally, within a day or two of having that thought, I was thumbing through a music magazine and saw an ad for what many people will recognise as a great print by Storm Thorgerson and available at Hypergallery. It was in the magazine. I didn't know that you could get fine art prints or album covers as fine art prints, I should say, at the time. So I phoned up the number, spoke to a guy called Rob, who, unbeknown to me, was your father, and we chatted. And I guess, to cut a long story short, a few tens of thousands of pounds later, here we are, and I started collecting.
Justifies our print advertising, then, definitely.
Well, I'm glad I
could
help.
You never know. A simple twist of fate.
Yeah.
And that then went on to led you into collecting from other places as well as us.
Yeah.
And doing a bit of publishing of your own.
Yeah, well, I pretty much chatting to Rob right here. At Hypergallery, it was quite clear that Hypergallery could provide all of the album art that I could ever really want to collect. But still the case today, I think Hypergallery wasn't really into rock photography. So I started to show an interest, and I met a few photographers and started collecting, and then I've done some publishing since, but it's been a long story. It's been some 20 years. Yeah.
What was the first print that you bought from us?
So that was Technical Ecstasy by Black Sabbath, signed by Aubrey Powell, and actually my copy is also signed by Tony Iommi. So yeah, that's pretty special to me. Still have it today, and yes, I'm a very proud owner of that piece.
So Hypnosis, and it was also Nebworth, the Nebworth quiz, which is theirs with Richard Evans. Yeah,
when I was in my study and flicking through that magazine, came across Technical Ecstasy, spoke to Rob, and he mentioned some others that you had. I think I dropped into the conversation that I was at that 1979 gig at Nebworth, and he said, "Oh, you really ought to see this." So of course one thing led to another, and I bought that as well. That was the second print I ever bought. That was the picture of the band, a photograph taken by Aubrey Powell in the Nebworth field before the gig. So and that's also a beautiful print, because it's got etched into the background of the print are dozens and dozens of Led Zeppelin songs. You have to look closely to see them, but it's beautifully reproduced.
Yeah, and those were those the Led Zeppelin's an edition of 500, and so we can probably come back to talk about that a little bit later on when you're going to talk about
Yeah,
edition sizes.
yeah, yeah.
So do you still have those two?
I still have the Technical Ecstasy one. I've since sold the one of Led Zeppelin to a friend of mine who I've known since I was 12 years old. He's a massive rock music fan.
Fellow fan.
So he's bought a few pieces from me over the years because my interest has sort of morphed from just being a collector through publishing, and then pretty much I guess I might describe myself as a broker, perhaps a chap you might want to ask a bit of advice of, or I know a person who knows a person, and perhaps could track down the print that somebody may want.
I guess all those years of collecting is also years of networking, so then people start to know who you are, what kind of person you are, and they want advice to come.
Yeah.
On your
I hardly class myself as famous, but for some circumstances, I might be useful to know.
Well, that's part of what's led us to do this, right? Because you've been setting up some events where you're going to talk to people about your years of collecting and some of the stories you've gathered over the years.
Yeah, almost unintentionally, perhaps the early days of a little tour, just an evening of me chatting about much the same that we will, about 9 rules that I try to stick to when I'm looking to add to my collection.
I think it's really useful for people to hear, which is why we're doing this. So are there any prints, aside from maybe Nedworth, that you wish you hadn't sold over the years?
Yeah, there are. There probably are a few, but the one that always springs to mind is the Who live at Leeds. That was signed by Sir Peter Blake too, and it was a special piece. I loved it, and the backdrop to letting it go is the fact that I took a call from a lady somewhere in Scotland, and this poor lady had recently lost her husband, and she was put on to me, and she said the Who were effectively the first gig myself and my late husband had been to, and I'm trying to track down this print. And me being a really nice chap said, okay, you can have that print. So I pretty much sold it for what I paid for it. Today it's worth a lot more, of course. Yeah. But I can console myself with thinking there's a happy lady in Scotland somewhere, I hope, who can look at that, and it means a lot to her.
Yeah, that does happen. It does influence how you feel about parting with something, knowing where it's going, who it's going to, what their story is.
I think we'll come back to it, but if it means something to you personally, then to be honest, a couple of the other rules don't really count. If it matters to you, then then get it.
So are there any pieces that you wouldn't part with?
Pieces I wouldn't part with. Pieces that I still own that I wouldn't part with. Possibly the obvious one for me. I've got a 1.5 metre square reproduction of Led Zeppelin's last studio album, In Through the Outdoor. It's signed by both Aubrey Powell, who took the photograph, and Storm Thorgerson, who obviously played a large part in the design. It's just a great shot of a bar in southern North America. And it's great. And at 1.5 metres square, it's huge. So it matters to me. Is that a
one-off or good?
As far as I know, it's certainly a one-off because it's signed by both Storm and Aubrey. That's very special to me. Yeah.
We actually talked to her about that image in our podcast because it's one of my favourites too.
Okay. Yeah. And I think following on from that and your question, I guess Technical Ecstasy, the first one I bought, I wouldn't really want to sell that. You guys supplied a lot of the collection, and there's a fantastic triptych of Dark Side of the Moon, done in a Monet style. I know they're difficult to get hold of now, so I wouldn't want to sell that. And the answer to your question is we're just refurbishing an old school, which may well be our sort of forever home. So I guess I've now got to gauge how many I keep. In line with how much wall space I can persuade my fiancée Joanne to put up with.
So we're tentatively starting to draw some of your collection out from you and maybe offer that to some of our audience and our clients who would appreciate them.
Yeah, that means a lot to me, having known you and Rob for 20 odd years. No, I can't possibly display them all, so I'm starting to let quite a few go, and I know Hypergallery are going to assist with that and release some of the collection a little bit at a time.
Yeah. So we touched on this earlier, and there are some guides or rules that you like to stick to or have historically stuck to and developed over the years when collecting. So we're going to talk about those in a series of small videos to follow.
Look forward to that. I've sort of put them together over a long period of time. Haven't always been able to stick to them.
No.
And not everything has been perfect. But I think they really are helpful to anybody that either has started to collect or is thinking about getting into this genre of art. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
Let's go on with it.